Hello, everybody, and welcome to Greet the Week. My name is Jan Moray, and my co-host here is Mona Duncan. And today the topic is what to do when you just don't know what to do. So, Mona, help us here.
Okay. Well, what to do when you don't know what to do, or what to do when you're doing something and it's not seeming to be effective. And so it's kind of looking at how do we make our decisions? How do we use our thinking skills? How do we learn to evaluate, to find the pros and the cons, so that we are not hijacked by our emotions? You ever been hijacked by yours?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the more familiar we are with what our perceptions are and our thinking skills and so forth, we can begin to put a stop to that. So I was thinking on this last Monday of February. No.
I think we have one more Monday.
Okay, the 19th, the next to the last Monday of February.
Today's President's Day. Some people might be home, not working today, or not at a job today.
Yeah. So, looking at the fact that it's a Monday again, do we take the dawning of a new work week, for granted, or we don't like it, or whatever? But maybe we can begin to change our perception on Mondays again as we begin to look at the faithfulness of the Earth's rotation. Because, life is all about cycles. We have spring and summer, and eventually, it goes around and comes around and so forth. But also looking at the fact that sometimes our own lives are through cycles. We have holidays coming up, and we just passed some major holidays, Valentine's, but then the Christmas and Hanukkah and all of that prior to that. And yet, how often are we taken surprise? Oh, it's December. Oh, it's Valentine's. Oh,
The year just started. How can it be the end of February already?
Right, exactly. And all the other things, all these cycles. So as we are more familiar with the cycles in our life, and how to handle them and how to be prepared for them, and realize that sometimes, our moods kind of go along with those cycles.
Right.
And our habits have a tendency to go along with those cycles. And so it's being aware of that so that we're not just hijacked by our emotions. And so we do that by an honest self-evaluation of looking at that, whenever the event happens, right then and there. But it's also looking at, it's taking a little time, a pause, and to look back on, do I like the way I handled however I handled it? And if we're okay with that, then settle it and stop going it over and over and over in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not pleased with the outcome, and I'm not just talking about the outcome that, that we exhibit, but also the feedback that we receive, because that's how we know more and more if we're effective is by the feedback we get,
And oftentimes people don't respond the way we'd like for them to.
Right. And so if not, it's not to grill about them. It's to see, how was I projecting something that maybe they were responding in a way that was not what I thought it would be. And could I have used my words better? Could I have had a more pleasant expression on my face? Is there something that I could have done that would have not evoked the response that it did evoke?
Yeah. Apparently my poker face is not very good, and I don't hide my emotions. And when somebody says something, I get this expression on my face that I don't even realize that I have. And people will look at me and they'll go, "Really? No, I'm sorry. My face is just showing what's going through my head. I don't really mean to put that out there." But,
right. And have you ever been around anyone that says, "Oh, what's wrong?"
Yes.
Well, nothing's wrong. Well, what's wrong? Well, obviously, if we're getting asked that question again and again and again, we're projecting something that we're not even aware of the fact that we're projecting.
Right.
And if there really isn't anything wrong, then we need to look in this mirror that we have right here to self-evaluate. Because when we look in there and we begin to see that there is some little changes, some minor adjustments that we can make that could make a bigger difference, then we have something we can work with. But we can't work with, we can't change the way we can't adjust their glasses.
No.
We have to adjust. I know. And so, have you ever, maybe made a comment to someone that you're hoping that might be course correcting, and they come back with, "I can't help it. That's just the way I am."
Right. I can't help it. It's just the way I am.
Yeah. And what's your response to that?
Yeah. Well, I don't like it.
But sometimes in making that comment, about all those things being recycled, maybe what this person is saying, we are recycling what we had heard somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or we have projected onto. Do what?
We don't realize that we're doing that. We're just reacting, and that's what we do is react. And when somebody comes back to us and comments or questions what we just said, then and you stop and think, well, really, that's not what I meant.
Right. And that reacting, as opposed to responding. Right. We want to respond to situations, to comments, to what we were thinking or whatever, respond to it rather than react to it.
Yeah.
And so it is, but someone that does say, I can't help it. That's just the way I am. Does it sometimes rile you about that person saying that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. Because it's like, well, if you really wanted to do something differently, you could.
Right.
It relieves us of our responsibility when we say that.
Right.
But then also, could it be because we see something in them that really could handle a situation more effectively?
We know they could if they wanted to.
Yeah, if they wanted to.
Or in some cases knew how.
Exactly. In cases knew how. That's what, Bob, we're going to kind of address your thing today, because you keep asking that all. But how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do that? Well, I'd like to go back to the fact that, all of us were children at one time. And we saw the world, everything is just exciting, and we wanted to look at it, and the only way we get any information into our brain is through our senses, and so we wanted to look at it and touch it and feel it and embrace it and hold it and look, tear it apart or whatever. But we had these authority figures over us that were loving us and wanting to teach us in the right direction, and maybe the way they responded, we may not have liked the look on their face, or we may not have appreciated the tone of voice or whatever. And so we store those things. Our body stores them, and we recycle them. And sometimes we see them in someone else and it isn't even there. So that's going back to the evaluating. That maybe even rethinking some of those former things, was mom, was dad, was my sister, was my brother, were they really encouraging me and I took it as nothing but nagging?
Yeah.
And maybe that nagging was because they saw a potential in me I just wasn't living up to. But when we hold on to those things, then we just, have it piled on from anyone else that maybe gives us a little frown instead of a smile or whatever, that doesn't respond the way we would like for them to. So, could it be because we saw ourselves, could we have been responding to that person or reacting to that person about you could change because we saw something about ourselves that we begin to realize, oh, maybe I could change too, but I really don't want to because
I don't want to.
Yeah. If I could just fix you, then everything would be okay, at least for right now.
I'm just going to leave things the way they are. I don't want to make any changes or do anything differently.
Right.
Are you saying there's something the matter with me? I mean, isn't that the question when we get defensive or whatever?
Right. Exactly. And it will never happen, no matter how much they come back and tell you exactly just what is. Well, since you asked that, just let me tell you. But we will never, ever, ever make a decision one way or the other until we decide to. So it's whenever we have to look in that mirror and say, well, do I have an attitude?
Mm-hmm.
Am I selfish? Am I always late? Am I this? Am I that? And I think about I know we talk a lot about choices and we can just choose to this, but sometimes that just seems too cavalier. Sometimes it just seems too hard, as in no way I can't choose because that's just the way I am. And then sometimes that just sounds like, the tooth fairy or something.
It's simplistic, and in some cases, I think it's almost condescending.
Exactly. So maybe if we could, kind of just stretch it out a little, although we can come to the point that we begin to realize we're making choices, but if we could just stretch it out, kind of put it a little bit further down the road, and begin to look at how we can own the way we respond to something. How do we can we own the comment that's made? As in the fact that someone else sees me as.
Of course, sometimes that realization is too painful for us to address at that time, and then that's when we get defensive and don't want to do anything or begin arguing back. And I guess for people, when you feel that fear or that anger, those negative emotions coming up, that's a real good time to stop and say, hey, what's going on there? What's really happening? Why am I reacting to this so strongly?
And that brings two thoughts to me. The first one is, have you had a friend, a colleague, whatever, and you were feeling really strong on a particular day, and you said to them, give me any feedback you can possibly give me, as nitpicky as it is, and no matter what they said, you were okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And another time, that same friend could say something and you get defensive. And, maybe our life isn't as satisfying or needs satisfying or whatever at that particular time. But I was also thinking that there have been some people or it comes back to where the relationship and the environment is so important. Because I'm guessing that most of us have had some people that weren't terribly close to us, but at the same time, they gave us some feedback and we listened to them because we still knew they had our best interest at heart. And it wasn't that they were trying to judge us. It was they were just trying to really give us some honest information. So it can be anywhere on that spectrum, but it's like Mona said earlier, where am I on this particular day? How am I processing it? And am I willing to evaluate?
Right. And so the first, what's the first step in change? Well, the first step is just to notice.
Yeah.
It's just to be aware of the fact that, that did offend me. And, kind of why did it offend me? Why did I find it to be so offensive? Because the fact of the matter is every one of us are flawed and fabulous.
At the same
and sometimes those flaws can be the thing that helps you to stand up for yourself. So that you're not tromped on or overlooked or misjudged, that you can speak up. So it's noticing when I am offended, why I'm offended, noticing how I respond, noticing how it, just be aware.
Yeah.
Be aware of what it's doing to us. Be aware of the feedback that we're getting. Be aware of the memories that we are maybe you may need to do that a little bit later, as you can look back on it. Whenever, you see, right in the moment, we are so emotionally involved. Even if it's a spur of the moment, we're still emotionally involved. So as we calm down a little bit, as we begin to breathe more, where the oxygen can go to our brain, and we begin to have that rational thinking again, then we can look back at, oh, well, that wasn't an offense after all, but it was offensive to me in the moment and the tone of voice or whatever.
So next time I would like to handle a similar situation like this, or I would like to be better at, or something like that is what you're saying.
Exactly it. And so then you make a plan. Well, how can I do that? You begin to make, some kind of because why? Because life is cyclical. I mean, 52 times a year we have Mondays.
Yeah.
And it just keeps recycling. And so, life being life, we will have another opportunity to encounter someone and be offended by it. We will have another, that there was a disagreement. We will encounter that thing again. If not in that person, then in another person. And the more we either learn to handle it in a way that we can feel good about it. The only time we want to really look at our feelings is whenever we feel good about them. We want to be aware of the fact whenever we're, but how can we adjust them so that we can begin, to continually feel good about the way we respond to other people rather than rue it and regret it. Because, I don't have my car out here, but our emotions follow our going forth.
Or even to be aware that there are times that you'll be more sensitive to something that somebody says than other times, and to know you, to know how you normally respond to something, and so, wow, that really bothered me this time. Maybe I haven't been taking good care of myself. Maybe there's something that I need to do, because normally a comment like that wouldn't bother me, wouldn't affect me.
Exactly.
Well, and I have a question, believe it or not. And if it's not correct for the topic now, that's fine. But you said that if you're unhappy with the way you handle the situation, or unsure, or you just want to do it better, you need a plan.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I have found, and I'd like to hear both of your comments on it, is lots of times people say, well, I'm just going to handle it better. And without the action steps, to me, it's not really a plan. It's just kind of a wish.
Right.
So would you address kind of what you mean by a plan, if it fits, or if that's a whole other topic? I understand.
Yeah. Jan, you want to go?
Well, for me, it's being aware that I'm sensitive to something, and the plan, I don't think it has to be a real formal plan, but it's because I think you just have to start with the awareness thing, and starting to be aware that this thing is happening, and to stop yourself the next time. So it's like the next time something like that happens, I'm going to stop myself. But if I don't stop myself, then I will go back to that person and say, hey, when you said this and I responded this way, I was a bit, I wasn't feeling real well, and I didn't respond the way I wanted to. Let's talk through it. Let's talk about it. So it's more, to me, it's more how would I respond to the situation to do some damage control, or whatever you want to call it.
A word I use sometimes instead of plan, because like you said, plans can sound so formal or whatever, but what's my strategy next time?
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, when we can own the way I reacted then and evaluate, is that really me? As I begin to know my intentions, my thoughts, is that really me? Do I really want to, diss them back? Do I really want to whatever, get that pound of flesh? Do I really want to do that? And if not, then I own it, that I did it. See, I take responsibility for it. I take my own accountability. That as we can, now I'm not saying that the other person is not being a royal jerk. I'm saying that the only person I have any free reign over is me. Mm-hmm. And as I look at me, then I have something I can work with. And then I have a greater influence with, not power over, but influence with the other person. That maybe we can, go back and talk about it and settle it in a more amiable way. And then I look at the fact, also in part of that self-evaluating is to look back, who else do I respond that way with, react that way with? And maybe there's some common denominators there, or maybe that common denominator is just me.
Yeah.
And so, how can I not have an edge to my voice? How can I not be put off by that?
And it takes practice. It takes time to be aware of it and to start changing your behavior, because because a lot of those things are just the way we are, but we can choose to continue being that way or to do something differently. But just because we decide today I'm going to respond in a different manner the next time doesn't mean that when next time comes, I'm going to remember, because it has not become a habit. It has not become my normal way to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So you come up with this supposition of what I might do. Okay, I'll just keep my mouth shut. I won't say anything. Or you know, I'll walk away, or I'll whatever. But then, especially if it's that coworker, that family member, that whomever, that neighbor, that you're pretty habitually having that little not blessed encounters, and then you really begin to think it through. But how can I do it in such a way that it will still, that I will be in the light, a good light that I want to be in, at the same time I won't be putting them down. As in walking away. That means stomping away. And not responding. It doesn't, say, well, I don't see it that way. I'm not going there. It's kind of coming up with a little dialogue that you can have something to say. There's such a difference in a comeback and an answer.
That's a good distinction, Mona.
So have an answer. Begin to think through, how can I handle this? I know I was talking with some people the other day, and they said, well, I just ignore it. And I said, well, the thing of it is everything we do has an attitude to it. And ignoring is pretty off-putting. Mm-hmm. There's a major difference in ignoring someone and in overlooking it. So how can I overlook their bad attitude? How can I overlook their,
attempt to control?
Right. Not to control, not to have power over, but to have influence with.
No, I say they trying to control you.
Right. And then also it's part of that evaluating and thinking about it is, what of me does need to be controlled? Because I'm not doing it. Maybe they were that messenger that I'm just like, oh, thanks a lot. That's really teaching me about me.
And then there are some people out there who really are trying to get a reaction out of you. They keep digging and making those comments, and that's when you have to decide, all right, do I keep going with this, or do I just let it go? Because sometimes no matter what you say in response, they're going to find something and they're going to keep coming at you. And so how do you respond then? I mean, I hate to just ignore or walk away, but sometimes I feel like when any time that you respond, you're not getting, it's not like you're not working together, it's more attacks. Then I think you get to the point where like, I don't really know how else to handle this. I'm just going to walk away and let things quiet.
It sounds like you're describing our repertoire of behaviors, and we pick based on the situation, then do what Mona said of, we evaluate how effective was it? And especially compared to how we wanted to handle it.
Yeah.
Right. And also it's calming that, it's giving our body a signal. Our body is a good servant, but it's not a good master. But it's a real good servant as we learn how to let it serve us. And I am also a student of EFT, emotional therapy.
Okay.
Freedom, emotional therapy freedom. And that is in the tapping. It is in realizing, that you say, well, okay, what is Gandhi's, that our greatest fear is not that we are superpower, not that we are not enough, but that we are super powerful. And anyway, you kind of just, tap on those things and get with those meridian points. But then one of them is right here, at the collarbone. And so for myself personally, whenever I'm confronted, especially, I mention this, I guess, every time, in working with the prisoners, it's a tough audience, and there's always rebuttals to almost everything. And so, they'll come back with this, yeah, but. And so I will just stand there and very unobtrusively, I will just do a little like that. And you know what? That just calms me down. So learn something that will just take you back down to that thinking, to that comfort zone where you can respond rather than react. whether you can give an answer rather than a comeback. And sometimes the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I know one night there was one resident that was real upset, and they were walking out, and I turned around and I said, where are you going? And I think he was just walking out, but because I addressed it, he turned around and he says, I'm going to the bathroom. You can't tell me I can't. And I said, well, you're right, I can't, but I'm asking you to stay. And he walked on, and he put his hand on the door, and he turned around and sat back down.
Oh, wow.
And I went on teaching, went on talking, where we were going with that. And as we can learn to keep ourselves, and it does take learning. It does. And so, what's our time? Because hear this, I can't help it. I can't help it. Well, our habits is one of those things that are cyclable, depending on where we're with. If we're eating chips, we maybe have a habit to just keep on eating and our body craves whatever it is we continually feed it. And so whether that's drugs, alcohol, caffeine, salt, sugar, it craves whatever it is we continually feed it. But it's a good master. And so as we cut the sugars, we cut the salt, everything is bland. Ugh, yuck, I can't do this. And then a week or so later, we pick up some chips, and our response is, oh, this is too salty. It's because we are changing, but we haven't let ourselves know we're changing. We haven't been. And so it's to examine how we have responded and say, is that really me? My deep down inside me, my ideal me, my high self me? Is that really me? And if not, what can I do? And then also to scan our body. The way I reacted to that, the way I, are my shoulders up to my ears because I'm so tense, I can't even relax into gravity that pulls them down. As we scan our body, am I breathing or am I holding my breath? So we scan our body and we self-evaluate. I am me, and I am made up of DNA, from 10, 12 generations back. But the thing of it is, in our genes, that we have this little epigene around it. The genes are familiar. I can see that. I can see mom in me. I can see dad in me. I can see brother in me. Oh, I don't like it, It's seeing that the fact that our genes are familiar, that our mix is unique. And that epigene above the gene, it's still soft. It hadn't not hardened yet. And so I can give it some new instructions. I can look down deep inside and see I am the engineer of me. And do I want to engineer me to be this way or that way? And as we begin to get that picture, we talk in words, but we think in pictures. And as we begin to get the picture of, and in that self-evaluating, we begin to look at several elements. What about me do I want to keep? If someone needs to be spoken to, I want to be able to speak up and be firm yet kind. Mm-hmm. So I want to keep that. But I want to curtail it. What is it that I need to adjust? Okay, I'm keeping that, but I need to adjust it a little bit. I'm keeping the fact that I have an unpleasant disposition because people are always asking me what's wrong. That maybe if I could,
a little bit, Mona.
What can I adjust? And then what is it that I need to just completely discard? And then also, what is it that I need to create? Because I was going to go back, we're, running out of time. I was going to go back and really all of us to look at and discuss our organized behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's that behavior that worked one time. And because it worked one time, by crackies, it better work the next 10 times. Only it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't.
Thinking it does and keep trying it and keep going over and over, expecting to get that result that we got before. That's so frustrating.
And Einstein says that's the definition of insanity. We'll get louder, we'll get more robust, because we're wanting that same. And that goes with addictions, that goes with everything. You have to have more and more and more, and you can't even get that initial thrill that you got just by the little bitty touch. Mm-hmm. And so as we begin to look at that, and it's also in that evaluating, it's going with the rules of science. And the rules of science is to observe, but not interpret. So it's to observe how someone treated me, but not to interpret what their intent was. To observe. And then how can I handle what I'm observing in a more, it may be going back to the fact that well, whatever it goes back to. So, 2 quick fixes. One is an affirmation. Come up, read through, find some kind of an affirmation, look at Pinterest, whatever, get some kind of an affirmation that really speaks to you. The one I use frequently is, in every way, I'm getting better and better and better. I'm getting better and better and better. And that in turn gives me the power, gives me the empowerment to say no to those Law and Order marathons, to those things that is not really making my life better and better and better. It is to not have to correct everything that needs to be corrected, to realize that maybe down the road it'll work itself out. And then another quick fix is to, being mindful may be a little overused, but it's to literally let myself know what I'm doing, what I'm thinking. And you learn to do that by starting off slowly and starting off when you're not frustrated. And if these crazy people that say we choose our choices are really right, then I'm going to let myself know that I'm choosing to pick up this pen and make a note with it. I'm going to let myself know that I am choosing to eat this bowl of chips. I'm going to let myself know that I am choosing to have ugly thoughts about so-and-so because of the way he or she treated me. It's letting ourselves know. And then I will continue to scan your body. I'm letting myself know the more I think about him, I'm getting a little bit more tense. It's that feedback. It's that feedback. It's a feedback of when it happened. It's the feedback of our ongoing thoughts about it. It's our feedback and letting us know. And then one day it'll just out of the blue, oh, I'm making choices. And there are more than this or that. There's a multitude of ranges in between.
I think that whole I'm choosing this behavior is a difficult concept for some people to really grasp. I don't know if it's because of the ownership, I'm taking responsibility, because if it's a choice, then it's something I'm purposely doing as opposed to something that's just happening.
Right. And it's in owning it, we are being accountable to, not necessarily responsible for. Okay? I'm accountable to the way I handled whatever that was that irritated me. Okay?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I'm responsible for what you said.
No.
or that I'm responsible for how you reacted rather than, to whatever I did.
Mm-hmm.
But I am accountable to the fact that I confronted you and maybe it was a little too harsh, a little too brash, a little too premature even.
Yeah.
Be accountable to what I thought, what I said, what I did, and also be accountable to the way I feel because of it or as a result of it, because that's part of our feedback.
Yeah.
And so, how do we know when we're winning?
Oh, we're keeping score. We're winning.
How do we know? Well, we scan our body. Can you breathe?
Mm-hmm.
And again, whether, we may, and then also what's your energy level like?
Yeah, the energy, that's a big one. That's a big one. Because if you're feeling drained, then you know something.
Yeah. because, you know, people can suck our energy out if we let them.
Yeah.
And it's in that I, you know, because they gave me that disc, I fed it, I ate it, and oh, it's soured on my stomach, and look how I have no energy now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is realizing that our body craves whatever it is we feed it. And what am I going to feed it?
Right.
And I'm going to feed my body positive high regard for, oh, well, maybe that one, but not that person.
I have to do that one later. I'm not ready for that right now.
Right, exactly. And if you're not, that's okay. Own it.
Yeah.
If you're not ready for that now, own it. Own it. And the quicker you own it, you know, and then it's because our body stores things and our mind evaluates. And that's part back to our creative. You know, as we're bringing something in, whether depends on kind of the heat that we put to it. So if we've got some heat there and our body's going to go back, and if we're beginning to look at it in a way as to how I can change how I handle those things, our body's going to go back and find those creative things. It's going to bring up those memories of, remember how you handled this one time and it turned out okay? So it's that. And then we, you know, I think of John Nash.
Yeah.
And he said that whenever he began to realize that all the thoughts he had was driving him crazy, not only driving him crazy, but acting crazy and all of that, he said that he willed to change.
Yeah.
He willed to change. And he came to that point where he could will that whenever it dawned on him that the little girl, the little 12-year-old girl that had been bringing him those cryptid newspapers for years, like 10, 12 years, had never aged.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the realization we get to is, you know what, I'm handling this the way I handled it when I was a kid, but I'm not a kid anymore.
Yeah.
And I need to grow up all the way around and see how I can. And, you know, I'm not saying that they're not a kid or acting like that 2-year-old brat. Don't misunderstand me. But I can't fix them. And as I fix me, I can be more in a position to be more nurturing and to have that room to grow, give room to grow. Remember when we were kids, they'd punch your shoes and get them a little bit bigger so you'd have room to grow?
Oh.
I think of that all the time. And whenever someone, you know, that I had this lady the other day that took credit for something that definitely was not hers to take credit for. Mm-hmm. And I just looked at her and I said, you know what? I will give you room to grow. Yeah. I give you room to, and I want you to give me room to grow too. So that we can all grow together for the good of the whole.
Did she understand what you were saying when you said that?
I don't know. I think so. You know, I really do. I think there's just something in us that those things resonate, whether we understand them or not. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Or maybe we think about it and think about it later.
Yeah. That's back to, you know, to those disses. Maybe that's some of the reasons that we get so upset is because it's resonated something within us that we haven't settled yet. Mm-hmm. And as we can settle it, and, you know, maybe it's something that can be changed, or maybe it's something that I just have to realize that, you know, I've got this broken arm and that's who I am. But usually, what is it Dr. Glasser says, that even the most inept among us, once they realize they're creating their own misery, can change. Yeah. So even, you know, once we oh, whoa, I mixed that up myself. Yeah.
And that's another one that's hard for people to accept. Because when you first ask that question, they look at you like, well, what kind of, you're crazy. What kind of a question is that? Of course, I don't want to create my own misery.
Right.
And you start talking about what they're doing, and they just don't want to hear it. It's like you're attacking.
Right. Like, you know, I questioned Dr. Glass. Are you telling me, you know, you're saying we create, you know, it was my malady. You telling me that we create, that I gave myself arthritis?
No, that's a tough one. That's a
And he just, he said, I rest my case. And that resonated, it made me mad at the minute, or I got mad at it. And I got to thinking about it, My little grandmother my maternal grandmother was literally crippled, was just gnarled by the age that I knew her, and bent over and everything. And I thought, well, it's in the genes. My mom has it, and and I'm giving it to myself. But I've really started thinking about it. And I thought, well, what is arthritis? Well, it's inflammation. Now, I knew I had a temper, and I knew I could bawl somebody out and chew them up and spit them out and not care. And I began to think about that. Is what I'm doing, am I giving myself that through all that anger I'm eating? Through all those, my big bully of a so-and-so, I won't call a name, am I eating all of that? And is it just churning up that inflammation and that anger? I knew the anger was there, and as we just think about
what you're doing to yourself.
Yeah. And what if I am? What if I am? And I began to pray. I mean, I just believe in a higher power. And I began to pray, Lord, I don't want to hurt other people, but neither do I want to hurt myself. Because I've been taught, that we are to love ourselves the way we love others. And I think maybe I know why I don't love myself so much. Maybe it's because I don't love others too much either. And as we really think about that, but what if I could?
What if you could? Yes.
What if I could? What if I could? What if I could treat me a little better?
Yeah, I think
yeah.
What a powerful self-evaluation.
In relationship?
For you, the one you just shared. That's a powerful self-evaluation. Good for others to hear.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Yeah. Well, like the little boy that hurt himself, well, he was scared and he screamed, and he and his grandpa were out camping, and he screamed, and he heard screams coming back at him, and he yelled, "Who are you?" And he heard, "Who are you?" And and he yelled out, "You coward!" And came back, "You coward!" Oh, he was just getting madder and madder and madder. And the grandfather came over to him and he said, "What's going on here?" And the grandfather said, "Watch this." And he said, "I love you," and "I love you" came back. And he said, "You are wonderful," and "You are wonderful" came back. And so he began to explain to him about an echo. And he said, "Son, that's the way it is with all of life. We get back what we give."
I like that.
We get back what we give.
We certainly I think that's a good stopping point for today. So thanks, Mona, for leading us through that today. Thanks, Bob, for contributing. And we'll see you next week.